Imagine leaving a crowded summer beach and noticing a polite young man with his arm in a sling. He asks for a small favor, just a minute of help. Minutes later, two women disappear. The man gives a simple, forgettable name, Ted. And for years, that ordinary face helped hide one of the most dangerous serial killers in American history. Ted Bundy remains one of the most infamous murderers ever investigated in the United States. He confessed to 30 murders, but many investigators believe the true number was higher. What made Bundy especially terrifying was not only the violence of his crimes, but how normal he seemed. He was educated, articulate, clean-cut, and capable of appearing harmless almost on command. This story is not about turning him into a legend. It is about how manipulation, timing, and institutional failures allowed a predator to keep moving. And it is about the women and girls whose lives were stolen while police in multiple states struggled to connect the pattern. Theodore Robert Bundy was born in 1946, and from early on, his life carried a sense of instability and secrecy. People who knew him often described him as intelligent and socially capable, but also deeply controlled, performative, and evasive. As a young man, he studied psychology, worked in politics, volunteered on a suicide hotline, and built an image of ambition and confidence. That image would later help him disarm victims and mislead investigators. By the early 1970s, young women in Washington state began disappearing. In January 1974, 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy vanished from her basement bedroom in Seattle. She was smart, active, and widely liked. Her disappearance alarmed the community, but it was only the beginning. In the months that followed, more young women disappeared across Washington and Oregon, including Donna Gail Manson, Susan Rancourt, Brenda Ball, and Jorgen Hawkins. At first, the cases did not fully connect in the public mind. Different locations, different circumstances, and limited forensic technology made everything harder. But survivors and witnesses began describing a similar figure, a handsome young white man, often with his arm in a cast or sling, asking women for help loading something into a car. That detail mattered because it turned sympathy into a weapon. Then came one of the most shocking days in the case. On July 14, 1974, at Lake Sammamish State Park near Seattle, multiple witnesses saw a young man introducing himself as Ted. He approached women in broad daylight, asking for help with a sailboat near his tan Volkswagen Beetle. Two women, Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, vanished that day. Suddenly, investigators had something they had lacked before: a name, a car type, and multiple witness statements. But even then, the warning signs did not lead to an immediate arrest. Tips flooded in. One of those tips pointed directly at Ted Bundy. People in his own life thought the composite sketch looked like him. He drove a Volkswagen Beetle. He had the right age, the right appearance, even the right name. Yet Bundy blended so well into ordinary life that he slipped through the cracks. Police agencies were fragmented, databases were limited, and the full pattern was still forming. Later that year, Bundy moved east to Utah. The violence did not stop. In 1974 and 1975, young women disappeared in Utah, Idaho, and Colorado. Among them were Melissa Smith, Laura Amy, and Corinne Campbell. Once again, the attacks often involved sudden disappearances, isolated locations, and a killer who seemed confident in his ability to approach victims without alarming them. One of the most important breakthroughs came from a survivor, Carol Durant. In November 1974, a man posing as a police officer approached her at a shopping center in Utah. He claimed someone had tried to break into her car and asked her to come with him. Once she entered the vehicle, the situation changed fast. DeRanche realized she was in danger, fought back, and escaped. Her survival gave investigators a living witness who could identify Bundy and describe his tactics. That identification mattered. Bundy was arrested in Utah in 1975. Police found suspicious items in his car, including handcuffs, a crowbar, and a mask. Prosecutors charged him with aggravated kidnapping in the DeRanche case, and she identified him in court. For investigators in other states, the arrest raised a disturbing possibility. The man in custody for kidnapping might also be connected to multiple unsolved murders. As more evidence developed, Colorado pursued murder charges linked to Corinne Campbell. Bundy now faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. But one of the reasons his case became so notorious is that he did something almost unthinkable. He escaped, not once, but twice. The first escape came in June 1977 during a court appearance in Aspen, Colorado. Bundy was allowed access to a law library and at one point jumped from a courthouse window. He vanished into the mountains. Authorities caught him days later, but the escape exposed serious security failures and fed the growing media obsession around him. The second escape was even worse. In December 1977, Bundy slipped through a hole in the ceiling of his jail cell, dropped into the jailer's apartment area, and walked out. This time he made it to Florida. That failure would have devastating consequences because his crimes became even more reckless and brutal. In January 1978, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In a short, horrifying burst of violence, he attacked several young women. Lisa Livy and Margaret Bowman were murdered. Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler survived severe injuries. The attack stunned the nation. It showed a killer who was no longer carefully controlling risk in the way he had before. Only weeks later, he attacked Cheryl Thomas in her home. Then, in February 1978, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach disappeared from Lake City, Florida. She was later found murdered. The victim profile had shifted again, and the urgency around the manhunt intensified. Bundy was no longer just elusive, he was spiraling. His final arrest came on February 15, 1978, in Pensacola, Florida. A patrol officer noticed a stolen vehicle and tried to stop it. Bundy fought, but he was captured. Once in custody, investigators began tying together evidence from multiple states. In Florida, the Chi Omega case brought especially strong forensic and witness evidence. A bite mark comparison became one of the most famous parts of the trial, though bite mark evidence itself would later become highly controversial in forensic science. Bundy represented himself at parts of his Florida murder trial, turning the courtroom into a spectacle. Cameras recorded his mannerisms, his confidence, and his need for control. For some viewers, he looked composed. For the families of victims, it was another cruel performance. Underneath the polished exterior was a man responsible for extraordinary harm. He was convicted and sentenced to death. Over the years, Bundy continued to manipulate interviews, suggest hidden knowledge, and speak in fragments about other murders. Shortly before his execution in 1989, he confessed to many killings, but even then, families were left with incomplete answers. Some never received full certainty. Some never got their loved ones back in any meaningful way except memory. And that is one of the most important truths in this case. Ted Bundy became famous, but the people who should be remembered are the victims. Linda Ann Healy, Donna Gail Manson, Susan Rancourt, Brenda Ball, Jorgen Hawkins, Janice Ott, Denise Naslund, Karen Campbell, Melissa Smith, Laura Aim, Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, Kimberly Leach, and many others whose names deserve far more attention than his. Bundy was not a criminal genius from a movie. He was a manipulative predator who benefited from charm, mobility, media fascination, and the inability of law enforcement systems in the 1970s to share information quickly. His case changed how investigators think about serial offenders crossing state lines. It also remains a warning that danger does not always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks educated. Sometimes it looks calm. Sometimes it smiles, asks for help, and counts on people to ignore their instincts. If you want more investigative stories told with a focus on victims, evidence, and the real history behind infamous cases, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell me in the comments which case you want covered next.